Bet with your friends on WynnBET Sportsbook today using promo code BlueWire to get up to $1,000 toward a risk-free sports bet. Sign up now at WYNNBet.com. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale coming at you once more without my fantabulous co-host, Adam Frommel. We're in the stretch run of our Team Lookahead series. We're up to the Orlando Magic, and I'm speaking with none other than Keith Smith. He's a contributor to Spotrac, Celtics blog. He's also on Spotify Green Room. He has a YouTube show / podcast called The Front Office Show. You should check them out on Twitter. You can follow them at Front Office Show, spelled exactly as it sounds. And follow Keith on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. Again, he covers the league at large, but he is based out of Orlando, knows a bunch about the Mavericks. The conversation was incredibly insightful. Before we get started, just the usual housekeeping notes. Please, pretty please, with whatever your preference is on top. Actual sugar, stevia, nothing, something healthy, whatever. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Hardwood Knocks wherever you get your podcasts. Downloading every episode helps us a ton. If you head over to iTunes, whether or not you use it, and search Hardwood Knocks and throw us a 5-star rating and also write a review. Those two things help us out as well, looking at the rankings in the charts just to help us continue getting the podcast out there. If this is your first time listening to Hardwood Knocks because you are just a very enthusiastic Orlando Magic fan, or you just want to hear Keith and I wax poetic about RJ Hampton / Jalen Suggs, maybe you're just here at random. Congrats. That's awesome. If you're here at random, if anyone's here at random, let me know. That's fun. On Twitter at Dan Favale, Favale. But consider throwing us that permanent subscription. We cover the NBA at large. Like I always say, we are pleasantly sub-mediocre and modestly insufferable. Follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. We are on YouTube, youtube.com. Search Hardwood Knocks. We will come right up. And we're on Instagram at Hardwood_Knocks. Also, before we get started, Wendell Carter Jr. has signed a 4-year, $50 million extension. As regular listeners know, I've had a backlog of these podcasts, and Keith and I ended up recording a couple days before he signed that extension, and we both talked about Wendell Carter Jr., and I want to echo some of those thoughts here. I don't think we've gotten any of the details. Ironically, Keith is probably the guy who has like all that minutia down, if there's any special options or guarantees, but it's a 4-year, $50 million deal. I don't know that Wendell Carter Jr. signs that unless it's fully guaranteed. That just feels like a number where if it follows just the regular base, he's never going to be making $14 million. That makes me wonder if there's a player option on that final season, 2025-2026, which would be his age 26 campaign. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. My guess would be, I'm just going to say no, because I feel like Orlando would, as a team, would probably want to try and lock him down as long as possible to give them flexibility. I love this gamble by them, I think. I'm very curious to see what it says about Mo Bamba's future there. You can still pay two centers. I think that's also a luxury here, is that I'd be a little bit surprised now if Mo Bamba does get an extension, but now that you're starting center for, let's just say moving forward, making $11.2 million, that's not really that much at all. And even to the larger context of the just the front court in general, Jonathan Isaac's number is not astronomical. He's in the first year of that 4-year, $80 million extension that he signed. And so sort of moving forward, what you're looking at is you're just going to pay, your starting front court under $30 million basically per year. It could go up depending on what Jonathan Isaac has some guarantees in there. I think he's guaranteed 4 years and $69.7 million. I probably should have brought this number up in front of me. The price from the team, I want every player to get paid. I wish Wendell Carter Jr. got double, whatever. I don't think he's worth double at the moment, but you get the gist. This is a nice, and I think it's good for Wendell Carter Jr., by the way, who has not just had the career that people expected when they were calling him baby Al Horford. This preseason specifically, it felt like he's playing more like baby Al Horford, right down to still not taking enough shots when he's catching the ball, especially towards the perimeter. He's not looking at the basket as much as you would like. I would still say a little bit more than he was in Chicago. He did take 3.2 3-point attempts per 36 minutes in the preseason, knocked them down at a 44.4% clip. Again, we're dealing with a 4-game sample size here. So I don't want to get, 4 of 9 from 3 is just not this huge sample size. That being said, he was more aggressive. If he wasn't looking at the basket, he was at least putting the ball on the floor. I still think he can be a really good passer. I don't know if he's ever going to be the type of big that's a defensive anchor, but he has some squishiness to him, some switch to him, portability to him, however you want to frame it. And when you look at who moving forward the frontline partner should be for him and Jonathan Isaac, he doesn't need to be just the backbone of a defense, since Isaac is sort of that defensive system to himself type guy. And so I think this ends up being a really good gamble for Orlando, because if he doesn't pan out, you look at that salary and it's basically going to be like mid-level money moving forward. Once the cap goes up in a couple of years, we're already look, the non-taxpayers mid-level exception is already around $10 million. He's making just a few million over that throughout this entire contract. That's for the team. Again, that seems like it could be great value. And if he ends up hitting and it's just like this league average or better than average starting center, I think there's still a chance for that. This dude is 22 years old. This ends up being huge for the team, makes it easier to flesh out the rest of their roster. They've taken some gambles. I think even Jonathan Isaac was a gamble, just now looking at his health track record. We know the Fultz contract is a little bit of the gamble. Has shown a lot in Orlando, but he's also working his way back from a torn ACL like Isaac, and your offense is going to be inherently limited even when he's hitting those mid-range jumpers if he's going to be your primary guy. And now they have Jalen Suggs in there. I like the thought process behind this. Again, I am curious to see what it means for Mo Bamba. I don't think it rules out him coming back, but I doubt you're going to pay two bigs that much money. And like if Mo Bamba has a good season, could he end up making more than Wendell Carter Jr.? If a number is like well short of Wendell Carter Jr., where it's like, are you doing 3 and 24 from Mo Bamba? It's not an astronomical price, a very movable contract. I do think if he doesn't sign an extension, I wouldn't call this fait accompli, but my guess would be that he gets traded by the end of the season. Those are just my thoughts on Wendell Carter Jr., and it echoes a lot of, I'm not speaking on behalf of what Keith said, but we got into that a little bit with the discussion. I just wanted to make that note since, again, Wendell Carter Jr. did sign the extension after Keith and I chit-chatted. But with all of this out of the way, let's get to the actual conversation about the Orlando Magic. We went in-depth. We went kind of long. It was about an hour. It was fun. It's a great convo. Please stay tuned to check it out, depending on when you're listening to this, because of the way, ad locators work and when I wanted to put this up on a Saturday. There will be timestamps in the description, or you can check it out at Hardwood Knocks. Once it's promoted there on Twitter, there's going to be timestamps on it. But let's get to talking a bunch of Orlando Magic with Keith Smith. Keith, thank you so much for coming back to the Hardwood Knocks podcast to school me on some Orlando Magic talk. Before we dive right in, first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm good, man, and thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. It's always fun to go deep on the Magic.
Yeah, they are, I was doing the outline that I was sending to you, and they're just a team where everything feels so decentralized, where I just wanted to ask you about like every single player individually, because I have like almost no idea where they stand long-term with the Magic. I think probably the best place to start is with Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac, both of whom are recovering from torn left ACL injuries. Do we have any sense of when we can expect even either one of them to take the court for this squad?
We really don't, and that's kind of unfortunate because they're pretty key guys for this team. And the hope was that Isaac would have been ahead of Fultz. He got hurt months ahead of when Fultz did. Mm-hmm. But when training camp rolled around and media day came and went, and he's still not ready to go, and it's going to be some time. And now there's been snippets and things shared on social media of the two of them doing on-court work and the like, but it always seems to still be individual work off to the side, nothing in the team setting and those kind of things. And basically the team has never put any kind of timeline on it. It's something that Jeff Weltman doesn't really believe in, because he doesn't want guys pushing themselves too hard to meet a timeline. So his only updates have been both of them are doing well. They're doing everything that's asked, and we hope to see them on the court soon, which is about as non an answer as you can give. and that's kind of where we're at right now. So we don't know when we're going to see these guys play again, and it's probably going to be at least a little while into the season. My rough guess has been sometime around the holidays.
Yeah, and that's like I guess that's roughly 12 months from when both of them tore their ACLs. It's just weird to be 10 months into the process essentially, and it doesn't feel like there's any concrete updates on either one of them, since the timeline for return on those ACL injuries normally seems to be like between 10 and 12 months or 8 and 12 months. I thought there'd be like just something more leading into when training camps opened.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Isaac, he had the knee injury prior to the bubble, and then really kind of blew out the rest of the knee in the bubble, and that was the unfortunate part was he was getting back from that initial injury, and now he's back into a position where he's got to work through still whatever was residual from that. Now added this on top, and that's I think why they're being kind of careful. He's a guy that they had signed long term to an extension, so they've got him under contract through the 24-25 season. So I think they're just trying to be very cautious with not getting him back too early, because I think their hope as the Magic is, hey, when we get this guy back, hopefully we can get him back and that's it. Now he's back, and we're not running into any of this other stuff because outside of Jalen Suggs, who I know we're probably going to talk quite a bit about, he's easily the most important player in the franchise right now.
Let's talk about Jalen Suggs, number 5 pick. I think a lot of people were surprised that he fell to number 5. As good as Scotty Barnes has looked with the Raptors, I would have taken him at number 4. How much agency over Orlando's offense does he get right away? And I think it's easy to say a lot, but I'm like looking beyond what they might need him to do as a scorer. Is this someone who's going to be tasked with just a ton of half court initiation and just table setting for others right out of the gate?
Yeah, I like the way you put that and ask that question of how much is kind of on him to really kind of captain the offense, right? Because it's one thing to throw a young scorer in there and say, "Hey, go do your thing." I think a lot of guys are to some level capable of that, but when it is really, "Hey, we're going to run the offense through you, and we need you to be our half court initiator. We need you to bring the ball up." All those things. That's when it gets a little harder. Now, I still think the answer is a lot, as you said. So I promise I'm not copping out and taking the easy answer. But I just think this team could be really ugly offensively on some nights because they're probably most proven creator off the dribble at this moment is probably Cole Anthony in his second year, and that's probably not a good thing when it's a second year guard as your most proven guy off the bounce. But I think what they're going to do is, and especially until Fultz is back, it's going to be Anthony and Suggs, and they're going to say, "Hey, we're going to run stuff through you guys." And then I think the third guy that they'll try to run some stuff through quite a bit is Wendell Carter Jr. They put in some actions where it's, "Hey, we're going to run some of that stuff." The things that, if you remember back to when he was drafted, there was a lot of Al Horford comps with him. You're starting to see those start to come back out again because they're kind of putting it on him of, "Hey, we're going to run elbow actions through you. We're going to run high post stuff through you. This is where it's going to be." They even their last preseason game messed around with him starting with Mo Bamba.
I saw that.
Together.
That was something.
It definitely was something. It was very unexpected, but I think it's kind of setting the tone for the regular season, which is going to be, we're going to try a whole lot of stuff, see how these pieces fit, and hopefully that'll guide our decision making as we move forward. But I think the challenge for this team is going to be that scoring, and that scoring creation, whether it be create a shot for yourself or create a shot for others. They're going to have to scheme for a lot of their baskets versus running your standard pick and rolls and isolation actions. And when it goes that way, it's going to be Suggs who's doing a lot of it, because I think even as a rookie, he's probably the guy who has the most promise and most talent right now.
And he doesn't even have like the safety net that, and I'll put safety net in air quotes if this was, a video podcast of Jalen Green in Houston, where there's even Kevin Porter Jr. showed flashes of point guard last year. There's DJ Augustine there. You have Eric Gordon there. There's just, you mentioned Cole Anthony. They have RJ Hampton. I guess when Markelle Fultz is healthy, he sort of helps alleviate some of that burden. But is there any, it's not even a sense at this point, but who would you like to see him log a majority of his minutes next to in the backcourt that might just help streamline his role?
Yeah, it really is. There's no clean answer to that. I was the one who asked the question of Jeff Weltman after they drafted Suggs of, now you have kind of a lot of guys who overlap quite a bit with Suggs and Anthony and Fultz eventually and Hampton and even to some extent Gary Harris is another guy who's probably best as on the 2 line. He's not someone who's going to move over to the 1 very often, and he gave a really good answer of, talked a lot about how more and more teams are playing with dual ball handlers, dual point guards, call it whatever you want there. And he said, and we think we might have guys with size in Suggs and in Hampton. Maybe they can play three guys at once who can do those kind of things. And he spoke about how so much right now is about finding ways to create offense and make the game easier for everybody else and those kind of things. So I think we're going to see quite a bit of Suggs, Anthony, and Hampton together at times. I want to see Suggs play with all of them, I guess is the easy answer. I I I like Gary Harris as a player. I don't really like him all that much for this Magic team because I just don't see what the future is there. I think he's probably one of the more likely to be traded players on this roster. So I don't know that I want to invest a ton of time with a Suggs Harris backcourt. And they also think Harris, just out of necessity, is going to play a lot out of position as a three, more so than the two, where I think he really fits. But yeah, it's so give me Suggs and Anthony minutes quite a bit. Give me some Suggs and Hampton minutes. Give me some Suggs and Fultz minutes when Fultz gets back. Just let's see, because that's kind of where we're at this year.
Yeah, it's funny how Harris and Terrence Ross, even you have to consider them threes almost with the way that this roster is built right now. Is there, and it doesn't have to be a head-to-head thing, but when you look at, just because they have so many guards, who intrigues you more long-term for this team between RJ Hampton and Cole Anthony? I'll preface this with, we know what both brings. I find myself just far more intrigued with RJ Hampton's game. There's like a suave, like smoothness to the way that he plays with some flair, and I think we saw a lot of that in that preseason game against the Spurs. But I'm just curious as to where you land between those two.
Yeah, and it's not that Cole Anthony is like this, wizened old veteran that's so much older than RJ Hampton, but he is a year older than Hampton. So I lean Hampton myself too, or we've already heard that he's still kind of growing. They think he's now maybe a legit 6'4", 6'5". They think he may still have another inch in him to grow, which that would be huge for just his overall versatility of his game. But yeah, I think he's a really fun guy, because I think I have doubts how much effectiveness Cole Anthony will bring to a team, especially when it's trying to be a good team as an off-ball player, where I think Hampton can function off-ball. I think just the time he spent in Denver, he learned what am I trying to say? The value of off-ball movement. He learned making cuts at the right time and in the right places and those kind of things, the value that has. And I think that's shown up a little bit with Orlando. Last year was kind of messy just because the end of their season was such a disaster. But this year in the preseason, again, playing off Wendell Carter Jr., where they're running some of that action off of him, you can see Hampton has that probably figured out better than everybody else. And I think just that ability to play both on and off the ball, that really intrigues me with him.
This question is kind of pointless, but I just find it funny because you look at last year's roster, will this year's team have anyone that averages 6 assists per game, or who do you project to even lead this team in assists per game?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. Yeah, probably. I don't know that they'll get to 6. I think Anthony and Suggs both could get there. And so I'll say yes, someone will. Who it will be, I don't know. But I do think someone will get there, or they'll have maybe 3-4 guys in the 4 to 5 range per game. And that may be where it kind of comes from, just because I don't know how much it's going to be. Here's our one ball handler that's going to do most of the initiation, just because I think that's going to be so split up throughout the year.
They did not have anyone get there last year, but I think when you had like Fournier, Vooch, and Gordon there for part of the season, they combined for like 12 assists per game between them. Without having them, I'm with you. I think someone gets to 6 this year. Not really an important question, but just sort of speaks to the oddballness of this roster. Yeah. Looking at the long view, and let's say he's able to stay healthy, is Chuma Okeke the third most important player on this team? And what should be some realistic expectations for him heading into this year?
Yeah, that's a really fun question. I'm gonna say no. I think it's Suggs, then Isaac, then probably Hampton, and then maybe Chuma Okeke. I think they're still trying to figure out what they have in him. Mm-hmm. He had kind of an interesting year last year. There was a thought of when he came into the league, hey, this guy may be able to play some two. And then I think as he rehabbed through injury, and just as the league just continues to downsize, there's more of a thought of, hey, maybe he can play some four now, and in his real position is probably really the three. But I think he showed some off the dribble shooting ability that we didn't necessarily expect him to have. He really competes defensively. I'm not going to say he's a good defender yet, but he gets after it. He can hold his own against most perimeter guys, and then he does okay against the bigs who aren't just going to back him down and put him in the goal. He does okay there. So I think he's right there with Hampton behind Isaac and Suggs, is somebody who they're really looking to see. The challenge is he's hurt right now, and this is even this early in the year, this preseason time, this is development time he's missing, and that's kind of rough because you want to have him out there. Especially while Isaac isn't out there, that was an opportunity for him to play 25, 30 minutes a night. And then when Isaac comes back, we'll see it gets a little harder to make sure he gets it. That may turn into 15 to 20 minutes a night. And for this team, it's all about development. So you really want to make sure he's out there getting all he can. And he's just, continuing to work through some injuries right now.
Yeah, it always seems like he's, I guess probably because he missed his rookie season technically, it always feels like he's working through something. But I am with you. I did not know that he had any semblance of an off-the-dribble jumper to his game. He was also just a little bit better moving without the ball than I expected him to be. And so I remain intrigued with what he's going to be long-term. What specifically, you already mentioned Wendell Carter Jr., what specifically do you think he needs to show to the Magic this year for them to view him as part of their long-term core? He's almost like, maybe they can play Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. together a ton, but it almost feels like it's going to be an either-or situation, and you have both who are extension eligible right now. And I'm very interested to see, you mentioned some of the actualization of the Wendell Carter Jr. to Al Horford comparisons and how this team is going to run some of its offense through him. Do you think that they already view him as maybe part of that core piece, and is there any specific part of his game, again, that you're looking to see whether it improves or is at least augmented this year?
Yeah, I think they view him as potentially part of that. I don't think they're locked in, and I don't think they're locked in on Mo Bamba either. Now, Bamba has a little bit more organizational equity just because they drafted him. They really talked him up when they drafted him, and then his first couple years in the league, he's shown basically nothing. He just hasn't been very good, and the team has almost always been better without him on the floor than they have been any of the minutes he played. And he was kind of force-fed minutes early on. Steve Clifford, you could tell that was one of those where he didn't really want to play Mo Bamba as much as he kind of had to early. And it was he would much have rather have played Kem Birch than Mo Bamba. And then I think even last year after the Vucevic trade, I think it was, all right, hey, we did this trade with the idea of Mo gets minutes. And then I think that might have factored into the Kem Birch buyout a little bit of, hey, we're going to take that take that tool off your tool belt there, and you're not allowed to use it anymore. So off he goes, kind of the old Moneyball approach of, you can't start paying you tonight because I traded him. I think that was a little bit of the thought process there was, we're going to force this. And I think the idea with this preseason all the way into the regular season is going to be, if either one of them wants to accept an extremely team-friendly extension, we're talking something that's in the $8-9 million range, which I don't think either guy would ever do to start off with, then we're going to let this play out all year. We'll have restricted rights and we'll figure it out. And I think to answer the Wendell Carter, part of it needs to be one of the two of you needs to shoot it well from outside if we're going to try this playing you together stuff. If not, then it really becomes an open competition between the two of you. But I do know they like Robin Lopez. They want to get him in the mix too. I know we'll talk about him a little bit more later. But I think with Wendell Carter, the idea for him is they show we can run some stuff through you offensively, because we know we can't do that with Bamba. But then you really have to show you can anchor the back line of the defense and hold your own in there and be a plus rebounder and all those things that we need out of a big, because he's never going to be that great of a shooter and passer on the offensive end to offset if he can't defend. So that's going to be something he's going to have to really show to make sure he sticks with this team beyond this year.
I've been impressed by a lot of what I've seen from Wendell Carter Jr. in preseason. I like this, and maybe it's a role thing and expectations thing in Orlando, but he just seems to be playing a lot freer. I'd probably still like him to look at the basket more when he's catching it on the perimeter, but he does seem to be acting more decisively. I think he hit a trailer 3 in transition against the Pelicans. I'm not that I was ever necessarily out on him, but like I'm more bought into him where it feels like he was drafted again, where I don't know if he's going to be part of the Magic long term, but I'm interested to see what we get of a full season of Wendell Carter Jr. unleashed.
Yeah, I'm with you. He also had a really nice play in the game against Spurs where he drove a closeout. The defender, in my opinion, closed a little too hard considering it's Wendell Carter Jr., but he kind of gave him a little show and go, put it on the deck for a couple dribbles, and then dimed up Mo Bamba right under the hoop. And Bamba finished. Bamba, as he's prone to do, turned the finish into a little bit more of an adventure than it probably needed to be, but it was a nice read and pass by Carter on the move. And those are the things that are encouraging. And then, like, half of this roster or more, he has to stay healthy too. He's a guy who's continually had these, kind of nagging injuries that have kept him off the floor. And I think Orlando would love it if they could get 70 to 75 games out of Bamba and Carter together to really wage that head-to-head to figure out, all right, what is it we have here? Because you got to kind of decide, are we committing to one of these guys? Committing to both of them probably is a little bit of an overkill unless they, kind of say, all right, we're just going to split the difference and we'll both take, $9 million a year. And there it is. There's our 48 minutes of center play for the next 3 years or so. But yeah, or is the answer, which it's looked like for most of the first few years of their career, it's neither one of these guys. So they're really hoping one of the two will step forward.
Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources that were once reserved for big business. So upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. Believe me, my fishing company that I started 5 years ago with my best friend Aaron called Woo Tungsten. Actually, it's pronounced Woo Tungsten because that's the sound you make when you catch a giant fish. Woo! We started this company 5 years ago, November of 2016, and we've been on Shopify since day one. We sell tungsten fishing weights, and our business would be nowhere close to where it is today if it wasn't for Shopify making things so incredibly easy. And like mine, Shopify powers over 1.7 million businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. You can gain insights as you grow, and they have detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is possibility powered by Shopify. Go to shopify.com/Blue Wire. That's all lowercase for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/Blue Wire right now. That's shopify.com/BLUEWIRE. Shopify.com/Blue Wire.
Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter. and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
This question will probably just resolve itself because of the two primary players we're talking about in Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Bamba. You figure on, I think at this point, yes, you want them to play in 70 plus games, but you probably expect them to miss a fair amount. But how does the center rotation get juggled with those two and Robin Lopez? Who would you guess is the player? And I feel like it's a matter between Robin Lopez and Mo Bamba that would get squeezed if all three of them are healthy. Or is that sort of the point behind playing Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Bamba together? Is that then you ensure that you get ample minutes for all three of these guys?
Yeah, so that's where it gets really kind of interesting because they do like Franz Wagner playing some at the 4, and then Mo Wagner, his brother. They also like what he brought, and he probably played the best basketball of his career with Orlando at the end of last season. Now you can look at that and say, well, yeah, pointless stats at the end of a junk season, but he still played well. And without Isaac, who is probably the best 4. Well, not probably. He is the best 4 on this roster.
If he's not, they have some real issues, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then we're really in trouble. But I think that's where you start to look at it and say, all right, how do we manufacture the 4 minutes? And then we know we're covered at the 5. Because at the 5, between Bamba, Carter, and Lopez, you've got 48 minutes of what they feel should be quality center play. It really, to me, how that shakes out depends on, or can we get away with Carter at the 4 for 15 minutes a night? And then it's either of the Wagners in there, and that's kind of how that goes until Isaac is back. And if we can, what does that look like? I think the idea for Robin Lopez is it's probably 10 to 15 minutes a night is his maximum that you're going to see him play. Okay. And that may even be nights where it's, Bamba starts, Carter comes off the bench, or vice versa. I think it probably would be Carter starts, Bamba comes off the bench, but Bamba's starting to show some stuff this preseason. But I think that's more the idea there is, all right, well, then what we'll do is those two guys will play probably 20 minutes each, call it, there, and then maybe Carter gets a few more because he slides over and plays a little bit at the 4, and that's how you get Lopez up to 10 to 15 minutes. But the idea behind Robin Lopez signing here was it was kind of interesting. The thought was, hey, bring him in, and he's going to beat the crap out of those two in practice every single day. And they're going to be better players because of it. The whole hope was Robin Lopez can do that. And then if some team wants center help and wants to trade a second-round pick at the trade deadline because they need a big, Robin Lopez at $5 million is a very easily movable trade. Then from Lopez's side, it was, all right, am I going to go somewhere else and be a third big and do all this stuff? And he likes that idea of I can be that veteran guy. And then people joke about it and laugh about it, but this dude loves Disney. So for his ability, the opportunity to live here and be that close, I mean, he tweets just about every off day that the team has that he's at one of the Disney parks or the Universal parks and all that stuff. By all accounts, he's living in his brother's house, which is actually on Walt Disney World property. So that's also kind of crazy. So yeah, so for him, he's kind of getting the chance to, I'm in a place where I'm really going to be happy, and I'll make the best of it while I'm here, and I'm going to help these young guys get better. And I don't think he's the kind of guy who's going to raise any kind of stink if he, maybe goes a week without playing meaningful minutes, because I think he just knows where he's at this point in his career.
Yeah, for sure. And I think juggling them is probably a lot easier while Jonathan Isaac is out, and you don't have to worry about, those 25, let's say to 30 minutes per game, whatever he winds up playing when he comes back at the 4, just gone. Like there's just more minutes there to experiment if you really wanted to. Where does Franz Wagner fit into all this season, though? I guess the first question is, do you expect him to get real minutes with this team this year? And do you have early impressions of what he can do really well at the NBA level?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Dan, as you start to build out this rotation, you start running out of minutes really quickly because it's like, all right, well, not everybody can play, every single night. And I think they do. It sounds weird because they're obviously a very bad team, but there are a lot of guys who need to play and you want to see play. And Franz Wagner's right in that mix. And I think the challenge with him is it's finding out what is he. is he a 3-4? Is he a 4? Is he a more of just a 3? And that's going to be what I think early on, again, while Isaac is out, and especially if Okeke's out, he's going to have his opportunities to play and play quite a bit, because they don't have anybody else who is really a 3-4 on this roster. He's the only thing that even resembles that right now. So I think you're going to see him get a ton of minutes early on, and we'll start to get a real sense of, all right, what is this guy and what can he do? And I think that's actually a good thing, because then by the time Isaac is back, Okeke's back, then it's, all right, this is where he's going to slot in and go. And I think what you're kind of hoping for if you're the Magic is your 3-4 rotation gets taken care of between Isaac, Okeke, and Franz Wagner, with a few leftover minutes at the 4 maybe, and then a handful of leftover minutes at the 3 when you go small with guys like Harris, Hampton, or Ross sliding up to that spot.
I did, and this is the only team that I've actually asked this question for in the outline because they're so confusing. I asked you for what you might think would be there, and they don't have to be beholden to 10 guys when they're fully healthy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they will be. But what do you expect? Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac are healthy. How do you think their like top 10 in minutes played winds up looking?
Yeah, no one can see me, but I'm doing the shrugging man emoji from the internet, because who knows, right? I think the blessing and the curse for Jamahl Mosley is there is no pressure on him to do anything but let's see steady development of these young players. So I think if he even went into a night where it was, all right, hey, it's now we're into February, let's say, and we're not exactly pushing overly hard. I'm not going to play Terrence Ross tonight. There's just no reason to. He's not going to play. That frees up minutes for everybody else, and we go. Or if it's Carter and Bamba both are doing their thing, Lopez doesn't play tonight, fine, no problem. I think those guys at this point in their career, they kind of understand where that is at. I think they'll eventually even transition to that with Gary Harris as well, where we'll be, all right, hey, we've got other younger players who are here long term we're going to look at. So here's what I'll say is, so assuming when Fultz and Isaac are healthy, I'll say it's the starting group most nights will probably look something like Fultz, Suggs, Isaac. I think those 3 are almost guaranteed. One of the 2 bigs, Carter or Bamba, and then Okeke or Gary Harris, depending on where they're at in that point of the season. That guy probably plays the 3. And then maybe Franz Wagner, if he really shows out and shows he's worth it. Then off the bench, you're going to get Anthony and Hampton are both definitely going to play major minutes every night. Ross will play his 24 minutes or so a night as an offensive guy, whatever big doesn't start out of Bamba and Carter. And then that last spot probably ideally would go to Franz Wagner if he's not starting, or maybe it's Okeke kind of in that last spot. And then that leaves guys like Michael Carter-Williams, who's hurt. He's probably not going to play very much this year. And then that's where Robin Lopez clearly at that point is the 3rd big. Eachwan Moore is just kind of there as a veteran bench guy. Mo Wagner is at the end of the bench, and those guys probably won't play very much. So I think that's going to be where it's at. But I think how they get a lot, if you look at it, if you pulled up their basketball reference sheet at the end of the year, I think you're going to see a whole ton of guys in the 15 to 30 minute per night range. But you're going to have to really look at the games played, because I think there's going to be a lot of guys who have on this team maybe play 60 games, just because I don't think they're going to push Isaac overly hard or Fultz when they get back. And then I think some of the veteran guys, there's just going to be nights where it's, you know what, we're not playing you tonight because we just don't need to. Well, let's really call this season what it is. It's about development more than winning.
Yeah, just this roster in Oklahoma City's like the hierarchy just does not exist. It's kind of it's anarchy. I meant to ask you this: do you think Franz Wagner can actually log a good amount of minutes at the 3 at the NBA level? I'm not offensively. I think he'll be fine. I'm just very curious as to whether he can hang there defensively.
Yeah, I think he might struggle a little bit defensively. I got really nervous in Summer League when he was guarding Jonathan Kuminga one-on-one. And Kuminga took him right off the dribble, right to the rim, put his shoulder into him, sent him about a row deep under the basket, and just dunked it with completed. And it was like he wasn't even there. It was that play more than any other is like, oh, boy, that's not good against a fellow rookie and a kid coming out of the G League Ignite. Now, on the flip side, you can say, all right, well, Kuminga had that experience of playing against pros, and he is a little bit stronger probably than the average rookie coming in and those kind of things. So, but you asked the right question, is can he hang defensively? Because if he can, then sure, he'll play a ton at the three, because that's really the number one thing this team is lacking, is a true three player. So, hey, if he can, great. If he can't hang there defensively, then you probably have to use him more at the four, and that starts to become a little bit more messy. Offensively, most people are going to focus on he needs to make shots. That'll come with time. I'm not worried about that part of it. If he's going to be a wing, he has to be able to do something off the dribble. At least it needs to be a catch, attack, a closeout, make two dribbles, make a pass, catch the ball on a swing, move it to the right place, those kind of things that you rely on for your perimeter wing players versus kind of being the last guy to catch and then shoot. He needs to be somebody who can be involved in keeping the ball moving. That's what I'm looking for from him on offense, more than I'm worried about him doing much as a shooter, because I do think that'll eventually come and not be an issue.
Yeah, summer league, it was certainly an issue. That was a rough go for him in summer league.
Yeah.
Do you have any clues or insight into what we can expect this team's identity to be under Jamahl Mosley?
Yeah, they're going to play really, really hard, and I do think they're going to actually defend okay. They'll have some of the missteps, and there'll be some breakdowns just because they're so young and they haven't been together at all. So that'll happen, but I think especially when Isaac is back, they can put a pretty good defensive group on the floor that I think can give even some of the better teams problems. Because assuming Isaac is back to what he was, that's a guy who could win Defensive Player of the Year. He's that good defensively. Gary Harris is a tough, rugged defender. I think Suggs is probably going to be a little bit ahead defensively versus his offense to start. His timing as a shot blocker for a guard is unreal. I think he could average a block per game. He's just got that good athleticism, sense of timing, and all that. You can Bamba can still do some stuff as a shot blocker, rim protector. We know Robin Lopez is still a pretty solid defender. Fultz has been a pretty good defender throughout the part of his career. Cole Anthony, he gets a little crazy sometimes defensively, but he does get after it. So I think that's going to be their identity more than anything is. I think there's going to be a night where if you look at the standings as a really good team and you're like, all right, we're going to Orlando, that's a win on a random Tuesday in January, and you show up and just assume you're going to roll the ball out and win, they might surprise a team or two just by playing with greater effort level than I think teams are used to seeing in the regular season. And I think because they're so young, they'll be able to bring that night in, night out. And that's now, should that get everybody super excited? That's tough because, saying your team plays really hard, but playing hard is a skill. It is an attribute that not everybody shows. So I do think that they will have that and they will get after it.
I think there's probably one of two answers here. We talked about both of them, but whether it's a specific position or skill set, what is this team's biggest weakness right now?
The offensive end of the floor. I mean, all of it. Who's going to make shots for them? How are they going to create shots? It's just just a mess. I mean, we talked about it off the jump. It's Anthony and Suggs are the only guys who can really consistently create offense until Fultz is back. And then Fultz has even been somewhat limited because teams, until he shows he's going to knock down jumpers, will play him to do that. They really need, especially early on, I think what we're going to see is a guy like Terrence Ross is going to play considerable minutes early on just because he's such a good shooter and they're going to need that out there. And I think what you want to do is you don't want to right off the jump, lose your first, 10 out of your first 12 games and the season's over before we even get to Christmas. You want to have these guys at least have some hope and feel at least somewhat good about where things are going as far as on the court goes. So I think you're going to see Ross and Lopez and Harris and those guys play a good amount at the beginning, and then they'll eventually phase those guys out. But offensively, it's got the potential to be a mess. I think if you like the 1990s, 95, 90 games, this version of the Magic may be for you, because I do think they can hang in there defensively most nights, but creating offense on a regular basis, it's going to be tough unless they can really do it by getting out and running and getting stuff in transition.
I'm almost wondering too if Fultz can even measurably improve their shot creation when he's healthy. Just I'm not sure that they have the spacing around him to capitalize on what he's going to do best when he wants to. The cadence of his game when he gets inside the arc.
Yep.
They need a good amount of shooters around him, and I'm not sure that they have those right now.
Yeah, it's very different than when he was there prior. And you had Nick Vucevic, who had become a very good shooting big, and Fournier was pretty good shooter. Gordon would come and go as a shooter, but they always had more than enough floor balance with him. And now that's going to be a little bit of the challenge is, his best attribute offensively is breaking down a defense, getting into the paint, making plays, whether that's driving kick to the perimeter or finding the bigs and those things. And if everything's collapsed around him, it is going to be tough for him to find that room to operate.
There are probably many answers to this question, and it can change as the season progresses and we have more information. But as of right now, who would you bill as the player most likely to get traded from this team before the deadline?
I think the most likely to get traded is probably Terrence Ross. He's got a pretty easily movable contract at $12.5 million. Every single year at the trade deadline, someone is looking for perimeter shooting and bench help, and there's not a lot of guys that do that much better than Terrence Ross does. Mm-hmm. Yes, he's very streaky, but he's got a pretty good track record of bringing that, and I think that's got him in a position where he's probably going to be moved. He's got a second year left on his deal at $11.5 million. That's still, I think you're perfectly fine to pay that if you're any other team in the league. He should deliver at least that kind of value as a high leverage bench player. So I think he's probably number one. And then I would say Robin Lopez right behind him. Just because I don't necessarily think Lopez will get traded, but I think there's a chance just because at $5 million, again, teams seem to regularly be looking for a big, going into the playoffs to firm up their rotation. And at $5 million, any team in the league can acquire him very easily via trade. So I think it's Ross and then probably Lopez right behind him.
Is there a chance that this team, I termed it in the outline, turns into a mega seller at the deadline, by which I mean just that they're looking at moving players you necessarily wouldn't have on that list right away because they don't – I think Suggs and Jonathan Isaac, and I guess because he was just drafted, you could say Franz Wagner, like those are maybe the untouchables or like your core. But like I'm also just looking at this roster and like if I'm Orlando, the only person I actually view is untouchable because you're not buying when you're in their position. I only look at Suggs as untouchable, and I'm just wondering if they start to render maybe verdicts on guys earlier than we expected to where do they move even one of Wendell Carter Jr. or Mo Bamba rather than seeing what happens in restricted free agency? Do they look at what if Fultz is, comes back by Christmas, plays really good basketball for a month, is healthy just before the trade deadline? Is he someone that they could look at rerouting if there's a market? Just scenarios along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, something has to give on the guard line because with Anthony, Suggs, Fultz, Hampton, Harris, there's just too many guys. It's questionable that they can play three of them together on any sort of regular basis. So something needs to give there. So I think we could see that become a thing where it becomes, hey, we're in a position where, all right, we're going to move on from, Fultz because there's an offer out there and a team really likes him? Or do you look at it and say, all right, well, the value's not there for Fultz, but somebody really likes Cole Anthony, and that's just eating up minutes that we'd rather give to Suggs and Fultz. I think something could give there. And then I think that one you mentioned first, the two centers, assuming neither of them signs an extension, you could very easily go into this year with, all right, hey, we're just going to remove the whole restricted free agency problem question from the mix, and we'll move on from one of the two of them. But the rest of the guys, I mean, yeah, Suggs isn't going anywhere. I don't think Franz Wagner's going anywhere. I don't think Isaac's going anywhere. I think Okeke's here to stay. I think Hampton is pretty close to, I don't want to say he's untouchable because clearly he's not that, but I think it's going to be hard to see a deal that makes sense to move him in. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of it. So much with this team depends on what do Fultz and Isaac look like when they get back, and then how does that trickle down to the remaining guys on the roster, because then that'll help guide decisions for what do we need to do right now and in the future.
This question is to some extent matchup dependent, and I would argue, especially with this team, and it also operates under the assumption that they'll be trying to win. What is their ideal crunch time lineup or most effective crunch time lineup to you?
Yeah, I think so let's say my snarky answer wants to be whatever delivers a 1-point loss. So then they can, hey, we were in it, but the loss isn't the worst thing in the world. But no, I think Suggs, because you want him out there getting those reps. Cole Anthony actually was pretty good in the clutch last year. He actually made a couple game winners and he made some plays. So I think there's a chance he's out there. Fultz is so hard to play at the end of games just because he won't shoot. There was times when even when he was healthy and this team was a playoff team, that he wasn't always on the floor at the end of games. So I'll say whatever one of the bigs played the best that night, out of Carter, Bamba, maybe even Robin Lopez if you're really going for it. Terrence Ross tends to just find his way on the floor. So there's two guys. Then I'll say Suggs and Anthony, and then Isaac when he's healthy, just because he should be out there. So that's probably where they go. Just at least initially, but it wouldn't be a surprise at all if it was one of those where, hey, we're actually in a close game. We want to see what it looks like with Franz Wagner on the floor. So we're going to have him out there instead of Terrence Ross. And he's going to run the same actions Ross runs, but we're going to run them for Franz and just go that way. They wouldn't shock me at all if that's something that they tried.
My God, this team's lineup data is going to be all over the place this season.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Is there I think looking at this roster, they probably could get weird in some instances if they want to. Is there sort of that out of left field, unconventional lineup you're hoping that Jamahl Mosley will try at some point this season?
Yeah, I want to see them play. I mean, so this is a broken record with Jonathan Isaac, but I want to see him at the 5 at some point. So I'd like to see Isaac at the 5, Franz Wagner at the 4, and then let's get crazy. Let's play 3 of the guards together. Let's play Suggs, Anthony, and Fultz together. Let's play Suggs, Anthony, and Hampton together. Let's go really crazy because I think that's just something I want to see. That's gonna probably be a post trade deadline kind of thing when it's like, all right, we've raised the white flag. It's time to fully lean into some weird stuff here with this group. But I do think there's a chance we get some stuff like that. The part I'm least hopeful of is the Isaac at the 5, because they haven't done it yet. They don't seem to have any interest in doing it. I don't know that he necessarily wants to do it all that much. So you're probably more going to get Carter Bamba at the 5, and then that'll squeeze Wagner off the floor. But if they can, yeah, let's get crazy and play all the kind of key guys together and just see, hey, is there something we can make fit out of this grouping and stumble into it?
I'm going to one up your insanity with my pick and say I want 4 guards plus Wendell Carter Jr. Or if Jonathan Isaac was going to take threes, I would love to see him there too. But give me Fultz, Anthony, Suggs, Hampton plus Wendell Carter Jr. at the 4. Look, let's just see what happens at this point. What do you have to lose?
And you have nothing to lose except the game, which is not a bad thing because that's one more ping pong ball. So let's go. I'm with it.
And look, there's a chance that unit ends up being like pretty good offensively because you do have those are probably those are most of your best offensive players on the court at once.
Yeah, I agree. I think the challenges, new coaches almost always tend to go towards what's not going to make us look like a complete train wreck on the defensive end. That seems to be the history with them. But the cool thing with Jamahl Mosley is they have clearly leaned into, there are no expectations of let's try to be good and be a surprise. You always hear those things a lot of times with teams of like, hey, we're going to shock people. We're going to be better than people think. And we're really trying to make the playoffs. No, they're not coming out and saying, yeah, we stink and we're going to be terrible. But they have talked over and over and over again. In Mosley himself has talked. It's about development. It's about figuring out what these guys can do, who fits together. And his only thing that he's consistently stressed is if you want to play, you need to play hard and you need to play as a good teammate and all those things. They did something that was kind of fun. They hung this big giant blue bell in their practice facility. And when they make what they call like a magic play, they go and ring the bell. And that's diving on the floor for a loose ball or, getting a rebound over the top of somebody, setting a really solid screen to free somebody up. It's all these little things that, you're not going to there's no stats for it necessarily, or there's not going to show up, in the box score. And unless you're watching, you're not going to know what happened. But that's what they're trying to build is play really hard, play for each other, and get after it that way. And I think that is the right mindset for this team to have, at least this year, and probably realistically into next year as well.
That's what's exciting about this team, where even, you don't have Isaac or Fultz on the floor right now. You do have Suggs, which is a draw, but I would argue, if nothing else, their guard rotation is just super interesting. There's just a lot of intriguing younger guys there, but it's also finally, and I think whether you're a fan of the Magic or just the league at large, you have to appreciate that they're no longer trying to tread water in that 6 to 10 spot. They're finally aiming for something bigger. And I think that's what makes this season even more exciting than that fire sale that they held at the trade deadline last year.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to hear you say that, because there's the challenge here with the Magic is they need to be interesting one way or the other. It needs to be, all right, they're a good team and they're pushing for the playoffs, or they are really terrible, but at least they're fun and young, and I'm watching and I'm rooting for 1-point losses. Because what happens here in Central Florida is it's college football all the way until we get to the holidays. Yep. And no one really cares about the Magic all that much. So, I mean, they'll sell out their games and they'll have fans there and stuff, but it's not, they're even though they're the only professional Big Four sports team in the city, they'll be fifth on the sports radio lineup, because they're going to talk 4 college football teams in the Bucks, maybe, and then we'll see. Then if they're not good by the time the springtime rolls around, Orlando City Soccer has kind of captured the city quite a bit, and people love them because no one came here with their own soccer team. So right. Orlando is a city where no one's from here. Everybody kind of moves to Orlando. So people came in with their own NBA team. So it's very hard to get them to give them up to root for the Magic. So they have to be interesting one way or another. And leaning into this rebuild is huge, because now everybody can look at it and say, now there's a clear direction. I can kind of get behind this. Now, making the playoffs a couple years ago, the bubble season, just so weird, right? Because they didn't even get any of the benefit of playing home playoff games in that sense. But a couple years ago, making the playoffs, that was big, because people were really kind of out on this team, because it was, all right, they're never really terrible. So there's not any hope of getting Zion or a guy like that. But they're not even a playoff team. So making the playoffs was huge. And then, them taking that first game, off that Raptors team, and coming back for game 3 in Orlando. It was loud in that building, and people were fired up and excited and all those things. And they lost. But I think if you could get Jeff Weltman and John Hammond, the president of basketball operations and the GM, respectively, to take truth serum and admit, hey, this is what we're trying to do, they would say, we wanted to trade Vooch. We wanted to trade Fournier. We probably wanted to trade Aaron Gordon. We wanted to move on from all those guys and really build the team we wanted to build. And then they made the playoffs, and I was like, crap, we can't turn right around and sell off every guy after just making the playoffs. Fortunately, they locked in a bunch of pretty good contracts. They're all fairly easily movable, and that's why all those guys did get moved. But I think now they're relishing the opportunity to kind of really build this thing the way they think it should be built. And I think that's got people here looking at it and saying, all right, I can get on board with this. I'm excited to see where this goes.
As we record this, their win total over under is set at 22.5. Are you taking the over or the under on that?
Yeah, the guys who set these lines are really, really good, because that's kind of where I am. Is it's always hard to pick a team to lose 60 games,
right? Even
though every year somebody, one or two or three people do. I will say I'm gonna take over, but it's only because the number of 23 wins has stuck in my head for a while now with this team. So I've got them at 23-59. So I'm gonna take over, but that's the only reason why. I don't know that I feel good about them having the opportunity to scratch 30 wins, and never mind any higher than that. Not this year, not with the offensive issues they're gonna have.
And I know the Eastern Conference is like the middle of it is deeper and more competitive, but like the worst team in the East was still at a 23 win pace last year in Detroit. And so that's why I'm tempted to it feels like Orlando would really have to lean into the skid in the middle of the season for them to not hit 23, but maybe I'm wrong. But I've been pretty generous with my overs as we've gone through these, but 22.5 is just so damn low.
Yeah, that's the thing. You start to really look at that is a number where if you're not pricing in a major injury, you're a major injury away from being a 12 or 13 win team at that point. Now, you could question, well, what would a major injury even be for Orlando? Because they're just not going to be very good. But yeah, I think when you factor in there could be some trades, they remove some of the guys who help win games, in that they're very young. They're not going to push Fultz and Isaac overly hard this year. And then I think by the end of the year, whatever veterans are on the team might as well start a vacation early, because I don't think they're going to see the floor all that often. I think this is a team that'll start stacking losses real quick at the end. So yeah, like I said, 23 I feel pretty good about. But yeah, if this was a 24 or 25 win over under, I'd probably pick the under, just because it's that tight of a window. But yeah, it's just tough. They may be the worst team in the East. We'll see, compared to the Pistons and then the poor Cavs, who they're trying to get out of it. And then we'll see what happens with Oklahoma City and Houston, right? We'll see, where do they go against those guys? So yeah, it would not shock me at all if the Magic went into the lottery with the most ping pong balls, just because I think as you look at it, like, yeah, that could be the way it all falls apart and goes for them.
Yeah, I don't look at a team and say in the league at all. I mean, forget about where they stand in the East. I think the worst record will be between Orlando and Detroit, just because every other team is trying. Even if Cleveland's try is sort of like, all right, attaboy, it's not going to last that long, but there you go. Oklahoma City and Houston are probably like those are clearly the four worst teams in the NBA to me. I don't know.
Yep.
Oklahoma City's the team that I want to say is definitely going to be worse, because I don't think Sam Presti's going to let them be better, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is really freaking good, and Lou Dort's good. That also might just be it when you're looking at like above average players on the roster this season. So I'm going to say the Magic. Here's my bold prediction: Orlando will not have the worst record in the NBA this year.
I think you're right on that, because I don't think they're going to be naturally that bad. I just think they've got a bunch of guys who are going to play really hard. And I think their veteran guys are guys who are looking to prove something in Fultz and Isaac, that are, hey, we're healthy, we're here, we're actually able to go and be pretty good. And I think that's kind of maybe the difference between a couple of these other teams. And I don't see them. Oklahoma City, I mean, it got pretty blatant last year when it was like, see you later, Al Horford. All right, Shai, enjoy, Cancun or whatever it is, or probably not, right, because of COVID, but it was probably just, hey, enjoy sitting on the couch. It was a lot of, stuff there. And I don't know that Orlando will ever blatantly lean into that. They don't have any veterans who are quite that level of good, that I think they're going to be like, man, if we play Markelle Fultz tonight, we might actually win this game. I don't think they're overly worried about that. And I think the Pistons, they've got enough good veterans that they could probably be better, but they even pretty actively started resting Jeremy Grant, guys like that. So I think that more than anything is going to be what keeps Orlando maybe ahead of a couple teams in the standings.
Yeah, Detroit was top 10 in crunch time minutes played leading into the All-Star break. They weren't winning those games, but the front office had to be looking at that like, all right, like we really need to make sure this doesn't keep happening in case we start accidentally winning some of those games.
Yeah, as someone who covers the Boston Celtics, I am well aware of what the Pistons were playing like early in the year, because they gave Boston everything that they could handle and more, including beating them at least once, if not twice.
Is there anyone on this team or anything about this team I did not ask you that you think needs to be discussed?
No, I don't think so. I think, we kind of hit on all of it. It's this team, I feel, I think you hit the nail on the head with Oklahoma City, where you can look at it and you can almost imagine any number of lineup combinations and opening groups and closing groups and everything else. And it really is it's a team that, as you kind of run through it, a lot of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. And I think that's the challenge Jamahl Mosley has, because yeah, it's great to have these guys play hard, you also got to see, all right, how do they fit together? How are we making this work? And there's some guys here who have to show some stuff that hasn't been there. And then you run the risk of a guy like Gary Harris, and I'm not going to accuse him of this because he's never been this kind of player, but he's on an expiring contract. He's the one guy with the big money deal. Does he look at it and be like, hey, I got to put up numbers. I got to look kind of good here. Because if not, do I end up going the way of like an Otto Porter Jr. where my next deal is a minimum deal because I didn't look very good on a bad team? What happens there? And that's something that Mosley's just going to have to manage through and figure out. But yeah, it's the good news is they are infinitely more interesting than the group of the last 2 seasons where it felt like, all right, we kind of know what they are. And I do think last year's team, had they stayed healthy, probably still would have been in the mix to be in the play-in. And then I think once they passed the point of no return with injuries, Jeff Weltman said, forget this, let's tear it all the way down. And I give Alex Martins, who really kind of runs the team on behalf of the ownership group, I give him a lot of credit for saying, yep, do it. Take it all the way down. I mean, we always say, get rid of everybody. They did about as close as you can do to that. I mean, I tweeted a few times that the idea of Terrence Ross being the Will Smith gif, where he's standing there looking around at the empty room, because it was like Terrence Ross was the only guy left because Isaac and Fultz weren't even there because they were both hurt. So it was really like T. Ross just kind of staring around at, all right, well, I guess this is what it is now. And to be quite frank about it, I'm shocked he's still on this team. If you'd given me the number one player that would have got traded in the offseason and got moved, I might have taken Terrence Ross. But here it is, and I still don't believe he's going to last the whole season with the Magic. But yeah, I do. I hope people aren't completely out on this team, because I think you'll have more fun watching these guys as a casual viewer of the NBA if you're kind of flipping around on League Pass. Plus, their home starts are always in that 7:00 window where there's only like
very
1 or 2
convenient
games. So pop in there for that first half hour and go. And I think they think you'll have some fun watching this young group get up and down the floor.
My top 3 reasons to watch the Magic for our listeners this season: Jalen Suggs, the RJ Hampton breakout is coming, I'm calling it, and the prospect, however far-fetched, of that 4-guard lineup that we just outlined before.
I hope so, man.
It never comes out. Keith, this was great as always. Are you able to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the work that you do?
Yeah, you can find my league-wide coverage, a lot of salary and roster stuff at Spotrac. That's probably what I'm known for there. Then if you're looking for, I know we just did the Magic pod, but if you're looking for Boston Celtics coverage, I'm part of the team over at Celtics Blog. And then I cover the Magic a lot just because I'm here in Orlando, so I'm around the team quite a bit when I go to a game. That generally tends to be where I'm at. And then if you're interested in roster stuff and the league as a whole, my co-host Trevor Lane and we host a YouTube show and podcast called NBA Front Office Show. We have a lot of fun. We break down all the latest news and notes. And then once the season starts, we'll be doing a near daily show where we break down kind of what happened the night before in the NBA, and a lot of focus on. It's not going to be a lot of LeBron James was really good. It's probably going to be more, hey, surprise, this guy towards the end of the Magic bench stepped up and had a nice game. We're going to try to bring you things that you maybe didn't notice as you were maybe more focused on your team. So check that out as well.
Yeah, or if you were just distracted by all the Ben Simmons drama that's going on, it'd be great for that.
We do a thing on the Front Office Show. Whenever there's Simmons news, we sound the Simmons siren. And we put.
So is it just going off 24/7 right now? Basically?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, we kind of set a rule that if there was it was one of those days where there was 15 of those non-update updates, we're not doing it. Then we're not going to sound the siren for that. But there's been a lot of the sounding of the Simmons siren for sure.
Yeah, recycling is good. We don't need the recycled news breaks, though. That's not breaking news. Be sure to follow Keith on Twitter as well. Fantastic follow at Keith Smith NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. Just want to reiterate, Keith, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for giving me so much of your time, and you can rest assured that I will be pestering you again in the future.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
What's up, everyone? It's NFL Hall of Fame wide receiver Cris Carter. And yes, I'm back, and I'm hosting a new podcast called Wide Receiver One, presented by Blue Wire and WinBet. I'm going to be talking to some of the best wide receivers in the game today about every topic that is related to football. Listen to me on Wide Receiver One on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.